In every city, certain business leaders strive to use their available resources to impact their community in a variety of ways. Our Why We Serve series seeks out these key leaders and gives them a platform to tell their story in their own words. We do this by breaking bread together at a restaurant of our guest's choice. This edition of Why We Serve takes us to the heart of Auburn to meet up with Hans van der Reijden, founder and CEO of Ithaca Hospitality Partners and managing director of Auburn Hotel and Conference Center. We discuss Hans' journey from the Netherlands, his hotel's experience in serving the local community, and tips and tricks for what makes nonprofits work best. Thank you so much for making time.
Absolutely.
I know you just don't have a lot of time running a hotel with all the meetings and all the things that you have going on. And so it was just a beautiful thing that you had a chance to sit down with me and talk a little bit about service in the community and what that means to your staff, to your employees, and all of that. And I know a little bit about your background, but I don't know a lot of details. So
how much detail do you want?
Well, I would like for our audience to know, like you're not born here. You're born in the Netherlands.
Correct.
Grew up there, and you also went to college there, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Born and raised in Holland. My family was in the funeral home and crematory business, and I learned early on that that's a calling, just not my calling, and fell in love with hospitality at an early age. Started working as a dishwasher in a restaurant when I was 14, and never looked back. Worked in the industry ever since. Went to college in Holland, and then when I graduated, I thought I was going to move to the States immediately. That was my dream, to work in a hotel, and you know, there weren't that many companies just waiting to give me a visa or pay for my visa and a job, and so I ended up working on a cruise line for 3 years, Holland America Line. Loved it, saw the world, and then I was fortunate enough to actually get a position with the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company.
Yeah.
Worked in St. Louis first, moved to Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C., New York, San Francisco, Atlanta. Spent some time opening hotels in Singapore and Turkey and Egypt, and then ended up 4.5 years in Bali, Indonesia. And the founder of the company, of Ritz-Carlton, is a gentleman by the name of Horst Schulze, who was leaving the company after it was acquired by Marriott. And the word on the street was that he was starting a new hotel company, and we all wanted to be part of it. So I was lucky enough to get a call, and I said yes before I knew where I was going, because in the hotel business you move a lot, and you never really know where you're going. It's just going to be a great new opportunity. So when I asked him after I had committed to join the company as a partner and start a new luxury hotel company, I was told I was moving to Auburn, Alabama. Had never heard of it, didn't know where it was, had to look it up on a map. Thought I was going to be here for about 1.5 years as we were starting the company here, and then move on, which we did. We went to Chicago, and in the meantime, we had fallen in love with Auburn as a community. I had never worked in a college town, and after all these big cities, I was really surprised as to what an incredible quality of life, incredible community it is. And so after 1.5 years in Chicago, I came right back to Auburn, and that was in 2006, and never looked back. And so we're now in 2019, and we're here and loving it. We sold our company in 2017, and I was able to start my own company last year in 2018. We took over this hotel here in Auburn, and we've been working diligently on the culinary center next door, and we are expanding our footprint and working on different hotel deals. So that's it in a nutshell.
Wow, that's beautiful. So let's say your starting point, because you have this aspiration to move to the U.S., work in the service industry, and it really started because of your experience on the cruise line.
Not really. No, I had an amazing mentor early on in that restaurant where I started when I was 14. Michelin star restaurant, which is 2-star Michelin, which is just a super high-end restaurant. And he always told me, if you want to learn about service, you need to move to America. You need to move to the States. And because in Europe, we tend to be very much stuck in a lot of tradition, which sometimes comes across as a little cold and distant, and sometimes even arrogant. And he said, he had spent a lot of time in the United States, ended up opening a restaurant in San Francisco, and said, if you really want to learn how to take care of customers, you need to move to the United States. And that's exactly what I did. I just didn't want to leave. So
once I got here,
I was on a J1 visa, and then I applied for a green card, and 2009 became a United States citizen. And very proud to be that.
And do you still celebrate that each year? Like the time that you became a U.S. citizen?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Is something
It was something very special. I had the opportunity to either go to Atlanta, where you won us like 1,000 or 1,200, or go to Montgomery and be one of 16. And it was an extremely meaningful ceremony that the judge presided over. And my mom came in from Holland, and it was a very special moment. I really am so glad I made that decision to, be right here in my home state, my adopted home state of Alabama.
Beautiful. And the reason why I wanted to interview you is I've just heard a lot about the great work that your hotel has done for your employees at a local organization, and I'll let you speak to that. But I've known for a long time that you've had a service heart, and I'm thinking creating an environment in a hotel which is all about service. It's service to your employees, I would imagine, is important. Service because you're modeling that for service for your clients and your customers. So how did you make that switch or that faith where you got your employees engaged outside of the walls of your hotel, and kind of why is that important?
Well, I think that we have 200 employees plus a little bit, and many of them are students. More than 50% of our employees are students here at Auburn University or at Southern, and we wanted to find a way to expose them to what we do. I think that for any business to operate in any community, you can't simply take, you have to give back. And I think everybody gets that concept, but how do you connect your employees to it? And we thought about it and realized that as a hotel and a restaurant, we have a tremendous amount of requests pretty much on a daily basis of, can you provide a certificate for this fundraiser and this fundraiser, and it's a dinner here and a brunch there and a stay in a hotel here, and you name it. And by the time you're done, you've done this 365 times. A, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our owners, and is that the right thing to do?
Right.
And B, our employees would never know, because my assistant would actually create a certificate, I would sign it, my director of finance would put it on the books, and we think we're doing so much in the community. And I think that impact is though it's important, I think you can do so much more. And so we made the decision early on to really adopt a charity that aligns with our company values and put all our effort in for 2 years. And after 2 years, reassess, and then most probably go to another charity. The only thing is that we did that 16 years ago, and we're still at the same charity because we can't possibly even imagine separating ourselves from it.
When you fall in love, you fall in love.
Yeah, and when you see that whenever I go to Storybook Farm, which is our charity of choice, chances are pretty good I run into one of our employees, and they are either volunteering or they're working in a garden, or they're digging a trench to put a fence in, or whatever the case may be. And that shows that we've been able to connect them with the mission. We make it a point in our orientation process, which is a full day, on that very first day when they join us, to understand who we are and who they have decided to join, to make it part of the orientation process, to show a video and tell them why, what, how, but also explain that we're not keeping score, we're not keeping track, we just want to be a conduit, we want to connect you. And if this speaks to you, whether it's children or horses or both, or gardening, or any kind of therapy that takes place there, we want to help you get there. And once you're there, it's up to you to see where you can best serve.
Right.
And it's just a wonderful thing that we talk about quite frequently as to what we're doing. And we are putting all our efforts into that specific charitable organization. And our company is founded in Judeo-Christian principles, and we wanted to make sure we would find a charity, a cause that would align with that. And Storybook Farm is a ministry, and therefore we think that it is completely aligned. We believe it's completely aligned with who we are. And so we've done it for 16 years, and we just can see that we are growing our impact. And I think at the end of the day, it has a far greater impact than just doing all these loose and certificates and left, right, and center.
So to summarize, if I'm getting this right, help me. You didn't really see like the impact or the return on investment when you're doing a lot of, I'm going to say, one-offs.
Yeah.
You would look at it at the end of the year and say, how is our community better? How is our employees better?
Yeah, I couldn't find a metric to show that we truly made an impact.
Right.
And I think there's a financial impact is one thing, but if you only engage 20% of your employee base, right? For us, that's 40 people that are now serving, that are maybe starting to do their own fundraisers for that charity, that are talking about it, that are connecting people. The concentric circles are so much more significant than your one-off certificates. And it's when you look at the end of the year, how much, because we need to put them at face value on the books, what you've given away in all these certificates, it's an enormous amount of money. But can you equate that to an actual impact? I really don't think you can. And so, there are certain things that we do outside Storybook Farm. For example, tornado relief. It's only a month ago that we got hit here in our own backyard with a massive tornado. We're not going to say because we're supporting Storybook Farm, we're not doing. Of course, we jumped right in and we served food and we took care of what is the need and how can we help. And that's urgent and immediate. But I think what we're doing with Storybook Farm is a lot more strategic by not just looking at the financial impact we can make, but really the connectivity. How can we create those concentric circles?
One of the things that I preach on a lot, I won't say preaching, well, that might be the word, my rant, if you will, is I think a lot of times if we're too short-sighted with our request, we're actually chopping down the giving tree. We go back to the same organizations, the same businesses, and say, hey, we need this $30 thing, or we need this fundraiser. And when you go for all those smaller asks, and you try to look back at what's been done, it's hard to keep giving and giving and giving in those increments. And those businesses really want to be strategic with their resources because the life and blood of everything that you do depends on that.
Yeah.
You won't be around very long if not. I think businesses more and more are asking how can they be strategic with the resources when they're serving, right?
Exactly.
That's volunteerism, that's monetarily, any resources or skills that y'all have.
Exactly.
And I didn't know that's how you came to know Storybook Farm.
Well, the other thing is that, it's the organization serves, when we started with them, and it's not because of us, don't get me wrong, but they were serving 12 children. They're serving between 1,200 and 1,500 today, this year. And what comes to mind is how can we do what we do well and apply it towards helping an organization? So when you think about fundraisers, you think about events and how do you put those together and how can we help Dina, who runs this program, and take time, which is so valuable to her, that she should be spending with children all kinds of issues, physically, mentally, instead of chasing, a vendor for linens and chairs and tables. Right. And so we've been very strategic in getting people on our board, advisory board for Storybook Farm, on that board of directors to see, do you feel the same way? And is part of what you do as a business in a way possible to support the needs? So Martin Builders is on, and they're helping in an amazing way with renovations and upgrades. As we're growing, we need more stables. Right. And they're going back to their subs, and they're getting them involved. And tailgate guys in the pre-event group, we need a tent that holds 700 people for Derby Day, the big annual fundraiser. Right. It would be a fortune. And we run that entire event at about an 11 or 12% cost. Now, in the world of nonprofits, to run an event where only 12% of what you bring in
Sure.
is spent on the actual event,
Right.
that's nothing. I mean, that's
Sure.
a really good metric.
Right. That's a great point that you're making, in that it's not only people and resources and strategy, but it's social capital too. You knew who to call. You say, hey, I have somebody.
Yeah.
Because of the hotel industry and all that you do, different businesses can play a different role.
Exactly.
And there's layered value, so the sum is a lot greater than the parts of it also.
And you can take it as far as you can. We have somebody who's active in the political scene in Lee County who's on the board. We have the editor for the OA News on the board. We have a gentleman who owns a Tetler magazine on the board. And so you start to look at how can we spread the message, because these kids, 1,200 kids, are not paying, or the parents are not paying 1 penny for the therapy. And we run that place on a budget. Thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you.
Of only about $300,000 a year, and you're serving 1,200 children. I mean, that's, how do you do that?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's amazing, because there have been many months in the past where we're looking at the end of the month at the financial statement and go, Dina, you need to start charging something, because we're not going to make ends meet. And she's like, absolutely not. I'm not going to do it. God will provide. And somehow, well, we know how, but we've never been short. It has been a miracle that keeps repeating itself over and over.
The question that I always like to ask in this series, Why We Serve, is if you had a tip to give a nonprofit that was just starting. Now that you've been a part of a nonprofit for 16 years, you've seen it grow and mature. If as that relationship has evolved, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the executive director, right?
Yes.
What tip would you give out there to young nonprofits starting a company, and even older nonprofits that's been around for a while?
I think step number one is really clearly define your mission and your vision. Where are you going? Who are you serving? What are you trying to accomplish? The more clearly defined it is, the easier it is for people to understand it, buy into it, and support you. And the reason why I say this, because I've seen over the years a couple of organizations where I would ask that question, and how people got so excited, and they told me a story that was so vast and long, and I got it, but you need to bring it down to bite-sized pieces. People can pitch, exactly. I think number two is create a board, so you're not pushing and pulling the cart on your own. People who are philosophically aligned and are willing to support you and use their network to help you. So the director of the nonprofit is spending half or more of their time on other activities than the core mission of the organization. So how can you engage a board to make sure that at least 70 or 80% of your time you stay true to what you're supposed to be doing, versus spending a lot of time on small fundraisers that may sound really good on paper and somebody gets excited about, but you as a director end up doing all the work.
Right.
It just takes time away from your core mission. Yeah, and it just takes so much longer to get ahead, to make strategic steps. When you're forming a board, make sure that you have very clearly defined bylaws as to how do you bring board members on board, do an orientation for board members before they actually serve on the board, make sure that they understand the bylaws and that there is a shelf life to being a board member. You're going to have to roll off after so many years, but you can stay on as an either ex officio or as a supporter or friend of whatever the organization is.
Right.
So you continue to engage new people, get fresh blood in your board of directors, and every time you do that, you're fishing into a new pot, and it's again you're widening your influence in your circles.
Right.
Not be afraid to work through committees. And I think everybody as a board member will look at the opportunity to serve in one of two ways. I go to a monthly or quarterly board meeting to be updated as to what you are doing. Yay, great job. And I go back to work and I wait for the meeting minutes and I show up next month again. I think that's not necessarily very effective. But when you start forming committees, that board members have to choose up front before they join the board which committee they want to serve on, and let those committees present in the board meeting what they have done since we last met. Now, you as a director of the nonprofit can stay really focused on your mission, and all you have to do is connect with your chairs of your different committees on a regular basis, by phone, by email, whatever it is. But again, you're not doing all the work, reporting it back to the board who gives you a pat on the back and shows up next month or next quarter to hear the same thing. You know? So
if I think I know the answer to this, Hans, but what you're saying is if you get the right board in for the right reasons with the right part, and they can do a lot of heavy lifting in some specialized area, then it's going to help what we're going to call the bottom line of the organization. And for Short Farms, tell me if I'm wrong here, but that might have had the way that the board is structured and how that's carried on for over a decade now might have something to do with the success of Short Farms.
I think so. I think we got a new chairman of the board 2 years ago. Kelly, who was the managing director for Rapa, an automotive company here in Auburn. And I mean, his strength that he brought to the board was organizational excellence, strategic planning, and has done a phenomenal job on transforming the board. And we just actually passed new bylaws that include those term limits, basically, for board members. And just by bringing him on the board, it changed the direction of the board a little bit, but I think in an upward direction. And beautiful. That's what you're really looking for board members that are going to help you, not passively listen to you. Also going to challenge you a little bit.
Talk to me about why you use technology as part of the hotel. Because really what you want people to do is to go to your website, right? And book just through your website. Absolutely. But if they didn't, if you weren't out there with a web presence, then they would be choosing other places, right? Is a digital footprint important to running a business in today's age, do you think? And should nonprofits learn how to use the tools to embrace it to accomplish the missions that they have?
I couldn't agree more. I think that it tends to be overwhelming to a nonprofit to start thinking about creating a website, creating content for a website, making sure the website is constantly updated, live, video content, photography, events. It's a lot of work if this is not what you do every day. And then you start adding social media to it, and before you know it, you'll spend half your day, if this is not what you do necessarily, to do so. And so my recommendation is always to look in your area for an organization which already has a number of nonprofits or one nonprofit. Check them out and see what their cost is, how much they create for it. We work very closely with a very small operator here in town, Hello Molly Girl. Katie Doss does a sensational job for us as a hotel. And here's another layer that we added by saying, gosh, the director of Storybook, Dina, is spending a lot of time trying to get social media content with her interns. The message is very inconsistent. We work with this agent over here who does amazing work for us. You may want to look at her and see what can be done. For her company, it became an outreach as well to say, I want to give back in my community, so I'm going to take this. Yeah, a lot of her time and effort is on a voluntary basis. But what I've seen happening over time is that the message has become extremely consistent between web presence, social media. They're linked, they're interacting with one another. And you can see that the engagement on social media especially is just ramping up so quickly. And I think that where sometimes we make a mistake in the nonprofit world is we think because of what we do for people, therefore our base, our supporters automatically know what we're doing, don't need to be refreshed, their memories at least, and they're always going to support us.
Right.
And I think the more you can promote yourself without being bashful, of course, but just keeping it in front of mind, it's gonna engage people, and it's gonna make them think about, hey, I just saw you do this. I know so and so who can help us with this.
Right.
And it's just being front of mind and being in front of people all the time. But as a director of a nonprofit, I can imagine that you absolutely have no time to do that.
I came into doing what I do now just because I couldn't find the service organizations that I knew needed money, and I couldn't make the donations because I couldn't quickly understand who they are, what they did, and how they were measuring impact. And today, Jay, you probably know that the our boomer generation now controls 82% of the wealth. And of our boomer generation, all of that money is going to be transferred down to Generation X with me, and then millennials. And the big move now within nonprofits is they're looking for DAS dollars. If you're a larger one, are you familiar with that? Donor advised funds. And if you're looking for the larger, we'll say donations or the legacy donations of a building campaign, if there's not a strategic way for an organization to be found electronically, do you think they're going to be found at all? I mean, you seriously don't?
Yeah.
So, because what happens is, like, I think, tell me if you're where I am, like a part of the university. University is going to figure out how to leverage that, right? Because they're looking at the big trends and numbers. And if the nonprofits don't make that transition, don't make that leap, are they in a position to fulfill the next generation of their mission?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that whatever your parents were excited about to support translates necessarily into, therefore, their children will be as well. And you connect with them very differently than you did with their parents. And so, without a strong presence on web, social media, etc., you're going to, at some point, your donor base may dry up. And how do you connect to a new audience? It depends on who you serve. But for example, if you have a large volunteer base, and whether that's high school or university level students, instead of allowing them to fall off when they're done with their so many hours that they have to volunteer, how do you keep them engaged? It's not by mailings and it's not by email. That's only by social media. Mm-hmm. Another thing that really worked for Storybook Farm was that we started a program some years ago, which was really promoted to the volunteers, which was basically a $10 a month automatic deduction down of your checking account.
Very good.
And it's hard to say no. And we called it like a 10 a month club or whatever it is. And what you encourage, because you are in touch with them, you have their contact information, is not only to thank them, but also to encourage them. Are you ready to go up? Are you ready to, instead of committing $10 a month, maybe $25 a month?
Right.
And before you know it, you start to get up to $100 a month. And then that's when it starts really making a difference.
To me, it's just being intentional about planting a tree for the long haul, right? Here's where we want to be 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. How do we grow that and mature that so it's going to be a lot easier in the future?
I think the other thing is, for any nonprofit to go through a strategic planning exercise is massively important, because you'll have a lot of enthusiasm by your board members, especially if a large board, which would constitute 6 or more, or 8 or more. You'll be bombarded with ideas. But if they're not falling in the framework of a strategic plan, if it takes you off center, mm-hmm. then nobody's going to get their feelings hurt by say, maybe we want to make that part of our strategic plan next year, but we agreed on doing these 10 things, loading up 2, 3, 4 more things, just going to dilute our effort over here. And if you do a 1, 3, 5, 10-year plan, whatever it is you choose to do, it helps channeling the energy of your board into one direction,
Right.
because they're going to be more than happy to go off in 20 different additional ones.
Sure. And I see that a great deal. It's funny you mention that. And every time you add one more thing, it's just one more thing, right? Over time, through consistency, every time you add one more thing, you're pulling away resources from another side of your organization, right? That could be volunteers, that could be money, and it could be exposure. And it's going to dilute the effectiveness. So it's harder, but you have to be disciplined in what you're doing and focus on the why of what you do and say no to the things that's not directly in your wheelhouse.
There's 1,001 ideas for fundraisers, but if you cannot guarantee that you have the same cost structure or therefore profit structure that flows back into the nonprofit, don't do it. If you can't achieve the same metric and you're putting an enormous amount of energy into something, but you're only walking away with, and you're doing it at a 90% cost, is that energy well spent?
Help me with this one. Some would push back and say, well, Hans, you talked a lot about a business structure, talked about nonprofits. And there's that great debate between should nonprofits be run like a business? Should it be run completely differently? When you think of things like KPIs and measurable performance index of how to either scale it or grow, do you think those are the challenges nonprofits should be facing or asking themselves?
Running something out as a business when you're in the nonprofit world sounds like counterintuitive. But I think at the end of the day, if you're able to see things through that lens, but you're not compromising who you are, what you do, who you serve. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to there's only so many hours in a day, and how am I spending them? And if I want to spend 80% of my time on the core mission and 20% on development, on putting fundraisers together, other activities, social media, et cetera, is that enough? And can I do that without the support of others? And that's really where I always think that, the more you can focus on your core mission, but you can activate others to help you in that other sphere, it's a win-win all the way around. But it's very hard to do because you'll be chipping away at that 80% real quickly if you're not disciplined in it, and if you're not strategic and intentional about it.
Right.
So the framework I'm trying to set up is clarify your mission, who you are, who you're trying to reach, and what are you trying to do. Form a board, and then have a strong structure to your board. Don't make it a social club, but have a very strong structure to your board. And then at least you have the framework. Now, we can't help ourselves, right? We get so excited about, that sounds like such a great idea, we're going to do it. But if you see everything through the lens of, are we accomplishing this to serve our main audience that we're serving through a nonprofit? Yes, great. How much energy are we putting in this, and what's the return? Right. At some point, somebody needs to say, it's a great idea, it's going to be so much fun, we're going to spend a lot of time on it, but we're not raising any money for what we're trying to accomplish. So in essence, it takes away from it. Right. And that's the hardest decision to make.
Let me use an analogy with you. Tell me if it connects with you. What I've heard you talk about is there's a lot of things that get in the way of the mission, right? I'm going to call that the minutia, for lack of a better word. And you don't go into ministry, into nonprofit. You don't go to serve others because of the minutia. It's because of the end result, right? So I like to think of it as painting your bedroom, right? Oh, we're going to paint our bedroom. It's going to be fun. We're going to change the color. I love to go out and pick the colors out, right? That's not the hard part. Right, it's all the plastic work that you have to do just to put the first roll on the wall. It's 3 trips to Home Depot. Yeah. It's all the plastic down. It's all the tape.
6 for me.
Well, and
it's not my talent.
It would take me at least 3, right?
Yeah.
But you're really worn out and tired before you even put the first layer of paint on the wall.
Exactly.
So how can service organizations be in a better position? So they have a lot more energy. They can actually focus on the mission by other team members or board members or software
Yeah.
that can help take care of the day-to-day stuff
Exactly.
that you didn't sign up for.
Yeah.
Let's work on that together.
Well, and I think having a resource that you can go to, so it's not where somebody on the board comes up with a great idea, or you see something that sounds like a great idea. How can I do this? And you have to start from scratch. Is there a place where you can find resources, where you can find case studies, where you can find examples of how something has been very successful elsewhere? How was it put together? What were the results? Are you doing it again? How would you do it differently if you were to do it again? If you can find that kind of content, then I think that's going to help nonprofits tremendously, which is what you're doing.
Right. If organizations can have a better understanding of who they are and what they do, they have, right? And they have a way to manage all of the participants and volunteers, and a way to get donations to procure more money, you're handling a lot of the heavy lifting, right?
Yes.
And the more those who go into service can focus on the very immediate cause,
Exactly.
we're accomplishing our goal by providing that infrastructure support,
Exactly.
and organizations hopefully a lot happier. The happier you are, the more success you've had with something, as you know. You've had success with something, you want to do more of it, right? What happens? Wild concept is what happens if we actually do something like an event. We're not tired when we begin. We're not even tired when we end. We just want to do more.
An interesting metric that comes to mind is something I learned the other day, which is that there's a high percentage of pastors and people who run nonprofits with extremely high stress factors, with extremely high burnout rates, and are simply exhausted. And so if you find yourself in that position, can you take a step back and say, this is what I love to do and this is what my mission is. This is what I have to do, but then take another step back and see and look at what you have to do and how can you activate others without having to bring on more staff, which you most probably are not in a position financially to do. So if that is something that that this can help with, then you're reducing stress levels, you're expanding the amount of people you can reach through your mission, and the impact is greater. And once you get down that rabbit hole of that emotional negative spiral, it's even harder to find a way to take a step back. How do you pull yourself out of it? It's extremely hard.
Do y'all have any service plans as part of the Auburn Hotel and Conference Center of going back out in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually doing another thing, and that is that we have a social committee in the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
It's employees who volunteer to serve on a committee to organize a monthly activity, and part of that is 2 times a year a serve day, where we all go out and go to Storewood Farm, and we make sure that there's lunch, that there's plenty of water, and we clean stables, we attend to the garden, we paint fences, we build fences, whatever it takes. Sometimes we take our leadership team out there to work a session with children,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes you realize that when you are working with children who deal with all kind of physical, mental issues, abuse, mental, physical, and as a dad, it makes you take a really big step back and count your blessings, but also makes you realize that spending time with these children is the best thing you can do. Pour into them because they're lacking that. They don't have that at home, and it's a humbling experience. The other thing we do is we have a food rescue program. We haven't even talked about that yet, but in the restaurant and the hotel business, we tend to have food that's over prepared, and we actually went to the food bank in Atlanta, which is the largest in the nation, to really learn about the Good Samaritan law, about how can you repurpose food, and with the large catering operation that we have on site as well as off-site catering, there are times where you prepare meals for 200 people, but only 150 show up. That food never leaves the kitchen. How can you repurpose that? And so we partner with the food pantry at Auburn United Methodist Church, and kind of middle of the week we start preparing a real heavy protein-rich soup with overproduced food. So instead of it going into the trash, it's perfectly fine. Make a real protein-rich.
Never heard that.
Yeah, real protein-rich soup, which then gets picked up on Friday morning by the food pantry, which is funded through the Food Bank of East Alabama. And then one of us goes out there to actually physically serve it. And we serve in that food pantry on average, I think between 100 and 125 families a week, every Friday morning. And there's a ton of volunteers, and they basically set it up as a small grocery store where if you qualify, because it is a federally funded program, because it's through the food bank, if you qualify, you basically can go there and it's grocery shopping. And it's for families that are falling, whether it's poverty or food insecurity, whether you fall on hard times, you have a way to get food for your family.
Right.
And when you're serving a really protein-rich, heavy-duty soup in August in Auburn, Alabama, at 9 o'clock in the morning, and people are eating it, and that people are hungry and they needed that little extra protein. So it's another way to really connect our managers, our leaders, to what we're doing, because we live in a little bit of a bubble. And when you go there and you serve the community in that sense, I've yet to meet one leader who came back from that, and we have a rotation on the whole year that we do it, who didn't come back touched by that. And so you're planting a seed to look at things slightly different than what you do day to day coming to work.
And it's shaping the very ethos of your company. It shapes that, right?
Yes.
This is who we are.
Yeah.
This is what we do.
Yeah.
And everybody plays a small role at different times.
Yeah, exactly.
And I didn't even know about this part of y'all's mission. If you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I want to, because this is important, I've never heard of this, because I think a lot of people are weighted with, you have a lot of food that's not being used in restaurants. If it's done the right way, it can be repurposed and recooked. And one of the best ways of doing that is to make a soup.
We grew up in our business thinking that we cannot repurpose food, that we're liable. Once it leaves the kitchen and goes out to the public, whether it's on a buffet or something like that, then the Good Samaritan law no longer applies. It's been exposed. It's in a different temperature zone. People can physically touch it or put something in it, and that's why you're no longer covered. And for the temperature differences, I think it's not smart to repurpose that. Some people do it anyway. But when it's overproduced, and we all have that, but it's overproduced in the kitchen, it's never left the kitchen, a safe temperature zone, why not?
So when you were living in Bali, and I'm jealous because I've always wanted to go to Bali.
You need to go. It's
Just the pictures alone. And I know the pictures don't do justice, right? But I noticed that you are a part of a board of an orphanage there. How did you become a part of an orphanage in this in Bali?
It's a great question. It's culturally so different, more than what you assume it is. It's Bali is a Hindu island. 90% of the population is Hindu in the largest Muslim country in the world called Indonesia. And when you live in poverty in Bali, have the opportunity to put your children in an orphanage when you cannot provide for them. But when we saw the orphanages with raw sewage being exposed, the living conditions were awful, but the kids were as happy as can be. I, being from Holland, knew that there was an organization that I remembered from when I grew up in Holland and went to college in Holland. Some of the directors connected with them, and they needed somebody on the ground, or they needed some people on the ground to help coordinate the effort. And so that's what we did. And they basically raised money, one orphanage at a time. and rebuild structures, put in plumbing and a safe water source, and that's how it started. And then they upgraded showers and beds, and then they really, it was very elementary, but very clean. Everything was working and very impactful, and then move on to the next. And so I'm no longer on that board, but I would assume that by now, every single orphanage in Bali, they've been able to touch and to upgrade, and that was their mission, and it was a wonderful thing. What I liked so much about it was they broke it down in bite-sized pieces. They knew that they could raise in 1 year $50,000. And then the next year, they got a few more people involved, and they were able to raise $100,000. And so they would, instead of waiting until they would have $500,000 to redo the entire orphanage, they came back every year and did it in small pieces, and then moved on to the next one. And by pulling every trip new people in to come along and to be part of that, you start creating again this ripple effect of more people engaged, more people activated, more fundraising, and the person who was really running that mission could stay on course 80% of his time on that mission.
Right, and within Bali, if you don't have the resources, you can put your child up for adoption, right? You're giving away your child,
And you can visit them.
and then you come and visit them.
Yes.
And what was that frowned upon?
No, it's a cultural thing. It's an incredible society where if I work in a hotel, which are the best paid job on the island, I am not keeping that wealth to myself, and I'm getting a nicer house and a bigger car, et cetera, or a car to begin with. That money is my family's money, and I'm supporting my entire family from that. Right. And once my family is fed, now I'm supporting my brother's family, and my sister's family, because they live much more in a compound tradition where the family doesn't spread out and everybody gets their own house. It just, the compounds begins to grow. Mm-hmm. So only one or two people have a job, and that money goes to serving the entire compound. It's an incredible society. I mean, it was a learning experience, for sure.
I can't thank you enough for allowing us to come into your beautiful restaurant here in Arusha and a part of your hotel. And I know you're going to do great and wonderful things because of the service part that you have. And I've always been impressed with just the level of service of your employees. I think it all goes back to the very roots of what you do, and the culture that you create. Ethos is amazing. So
thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.